Okay, guys, welcome to another COVID-19 Small Business Support Centre webinar. It's glorious sun here in London, and I've just heard from our friend in Chicago that it's inches of snow there. So it's amazing how the world is experiencing different weather conditions, but I'm just happy that it's sunny right now. I hate the rain as it is anyway. So welcome to another a webinar. This one's true to form in this week's focus on digitalization, disruption, and high performance. We have a double duo from TechCXO now, a double duo that's going to be taking over for the next hour, talking really about the importance of digitalization, but not just about the digitalization, but I think more around the whole thing around mindset and strategy and the core thing that you need within the leadership of your business. I'm really privileged to have Saurab Bhargava join us. Saurab, it's really nice to have you on board. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks so much, Kenton. Thanks, Piers. Really looking forward to the discussion, and hello to everyone out there all over the world. Hopefully your weather is better than ours here in Chicago.
Yeah, well, snow. It's, Saurab, you were just saying that you woke up to several inches of snow, right? Normally you get a bit of dusting, is that correct?
We usually do. I mean, this is for anybody who knows American culture, this is typically the start of the baseball season. There's always a few games that get interfered with a little bit here in early April. But this feels a little bit like salt on the wound.
As so, and Piers, really good to see you today. Piers is, for all of you that are watching this, Piers is our resident expert. He normally comes on pretty much all of our webinars. It's a delight to have him. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thanks, Kat. And hi, I'm great to be here as well. So thanks again for inviting me in. I hope I don't come across as a know-all. So in this particular session, I'm going to bow to the experience and expertise of Saurab. So we've worked together for quite a lot within TechCXO, and Saurab runs our digital division, which is an area of expertise which is absolutely right in the sweet spot at the moment. So delighted to be here and hope I can add some value to the call.
Fantastic. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you on board as well. So let's get into this. Anyone that's watching this on the webinar, you have a Q&A function within Zoom, which will allow you to ask any questions. And if you are watching this off the Facebook Live, feel free to send us any comments, any questions, and I'll get those positioned to the experts as we go through this next hour. But what am I talking about here? We're talking about why it's so important to digitize your business now more than ever. We've heard the whole thing around digital transformation. We've understood this whole thing around digital products, and you're hearing more and more about the need to use things like Zoom and I guess email automations and digital marketing tools, etc. Digital is the word that keeps coming up here. So what we're going to start with is we're going to get sort of to break down the myth, demystify this whole thing about digitization. What is, or what does it mean to actually digitize your business? Sorry, can we start there?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting setup, because the first thing I would challenge all of us, certainly the three of us, but then all of us at large, is, challenge yourself to not say the word digital at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the big things happening out there, because, as I talk to leaders, as I talk to people out there, I think that digital itself, let alone if you add the word transformation on top of it, is almost become, it's too broad a word, but it's also a bit of a paralyzing word, because you then ask the question of like, well, what do you mean? Like, what are we talking about here? More often than not, I think that what happens is people are equating the word digital with technology. And I think maybe that comes from, the history of all of this, but, you think about early uses of the word digital sometimes are related to clocks, right? Digital versus an analog clock. But at the end of the day, a digital clock wasn't truly digital. It was just a technology, right? It just didn't have two hands on it, and it had, LED numbers. So I think that we just fall in this trap that everything that you put a battery into is digital, and I think we have to pull ourselves out of that. So the first thing I would challenge all of us to do is let's level set. What are we talking about when we say digitize your business? we could be talking about a lot of things. So what I'm going to set up here is not the answer, but it's really what I think is the swim lane that we should sort of constrain ourselves to so that we can be having a meaningful dialogue, right? So instead of the word digital, I would ask us to try to use the word online. And here's why I mean that, because typically speaking, when we're talking about digital in the context of 2020, we're talking about online enablement of traditionally offline things. So when we say digital transformation, what we're talking about is taking an aspect of your business that has been traditionally offline and we're going to try to move it online, right? We're talking about websites and mobile. We're talking about chatbots. We're not talking about the actual iPhone. We're talking about the experiences on the iPhone, right? The iPhone is a technology, but the experiences on them are what we're talking about. So I think if we say, when we say digital, what we're really talking about are online experiences to the effect of customer self-service. And I think COVID has exposed an or to that, which is customer self-service or remote engagement, right? So telehealth, which I encouraged by the fact that this could be a great opportunity for telehealth to really find its footing. And that's really all about remote engagement, right? Zoom, what we're doing right now? This is using technology to create an experience, an online experience of remote engagement. And I found that the more we say online enablement or online experiences, the more we can actually take action and understand what we're talking about and what we're not talking about, right? So I would start there and just kind of set that foundation.
It's interesting you say that, because I think, we've had this conversation beyond, well before this this session, and I was talking about the whole thing around digital transformation, and the corporate world has invested 900 million, almost $1 billion into digital transformation, and it's absolutely failed. It's been a coherent, but I mean, some elements of it are success. I mean, you mentioned when we were talking about, there are certain elements of digitization which create more success, but overall it's kind of failed. Is this because the way it's being perceived, the way you just broke that down and defined, digitizing your business is not about the technology, it's about the experience? Do you feel that this is something that organizations have got wrong early doors when they start to try to digitize their businesses?
Well, I think that you have to, there's tons of surveys and statistics around this idea of failure and success. And, sadly, most of them yield a result of failure, right? That these surveys say that most people believe that their organization's digital efforts have been largely unsuccessful. So I don't believe that in one level, and you go a little bit deeper and you understand why they're saying that. So on one level, you can say, look, I built a website and it's operational and it's working. That's not a failure, right? And that's great. But somebody's deeming that to be unsuccessful. And so I think level one is why. I think why people can view that as unsuccessful is it doesn't necessarily meet the goals that they set out to establish or to achieve. So while it does something effective, does it do the thing that you actually wanted it to do, right? I talk a lot in terms of like home redesign as a good, metaphor. And I could say, look, I'd love to change the wall colors of this room, and I'd like something bright and cheery. Somebody can come in and paint something, deep maroon and earthy and very sad, and I can say, look, yes, you've changed the wall color. So by definition, you have done something, but you didn't do the thing that I wanted to, right? So I'm going to call it unsuccessful. So I think that's level one. I think level two, which is very interesting, is this idea of a lot of us, myself, maybe as guilty as anybody, is we sometimes get lost in the aspiration and the lingo of what we're talking about that it becomes very paralyzing. So here's an example. I walk around every day and I'm using words like MarTech and personalization and these kinds of things. And I think the concepts are great, right? I think they're the right concepts to talk about. And then I start to see that as I'm talking to a CEO or somebody on the board or something about these concepts, you can see this sort of seizing up, right? Like they're like, oh my God. And I think the reason is, well, that's a great word, but in order to get there, I've got to fundamentally change my entire business, right? And that's scary. That's a multi-year journey. I'll give you an example, or kind of like a metaphor to it. If you think about, you went and you invested and you bought this beautiful new flat screen TV, and it's sitting in your living room and it's amazing. But you've got it sitting on a TV stand from, you bought from IKEA circa 1990, right? And everyone says, look, you got to mount your TV on your wall. That is the thing to do, right? And you believe it. Like, great, I want to mount my TV on my wall. I'm going to bring somebody in and they're going to drill the screws in and hang my TV and I'm going to be exactly where I need to be. Everybody's got this experience. I'm thrilled. Well, now somebody comes in and says, great, I'll mount your TV. That would take me about half an hour of work. But Ketan, in order for me to mount your TV, I've actually got to pull all your drywall down. I've got to change all your electrical. I've got to change all your plumbing and piping. I've got to change the foundation of the wood so that I have studs I can mount into. So that'll take me about 2 years and about $10 million. After that, I'll take 5 minutes to mount your TV. That's what's happening in my space. We're talking about something like mounting your TV. We're saying we should use your data to personalize and create great experiences for customers. Awesome, I'm in. I want that. Great, for us to do that, we need 2 years worth of work, $10 million. We're gonna revamp all your data, all your systems, all your processes and staff and everything. And then what do? You're gonna say, maybe it's not worth it for me to mount my TV, right? I'll just stick with my IKEA stand, thank you. So that's a lot of what's happening. And that is then deemed as unsuccessful.
Well, do you feel that it's a sense that people want the baby without the labor pains? They just want that instant result, that instant gratification of I'm now.
I'm not so sure it's that. I'm sure there is some of that, absolutely. But I think it's we're dealing in a space that this whole idea of online enablement, and these are massively complex systems. And I think people understand that they're complex systems. And so they know that there's some effort behind it, but they're just really scared of a few things. Like, how long is this really going to take? I hear a number of stories of the biggest brands in the world, being unsuccessful. Do I have the right team? Do I have the right people who could do this? And can I allocate them properly, right? So every organization will say, look, I have IT staff, I have marketing staff, I have digital staff, I have analytics staff, but they're all working on other initiatives. So do I need to hire a new team? Do I need to bring in a consultancy at their rates? So there's all these things that at some point you just say, is it worth it at all, right? Like, I can't handle all this. And so we'll just wait and we'll see how it just sort of sorts itself out. Well, maybe it doesn't, right? And I think that COVID has exposed a lot of organizations for which it didn't really sort itself out. And I think it's exposed a lot of organizations that were ready.
I agree entirely with that sentiment about, this has exposed a lot of things. I've spoken a lot recently about going back to basics. And, oftentimes people have this ideology of what it should be like and what it could be like. And they say, yep, that's what we're going to do. And they invest $XD million or $XD,000 in doing that, only to find it's fallen short of expectations for many clear and obvious reasons. Because sometimes, as you say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, but often you don't know what the squeeze is.
Right.
You know what you get to, but you just don't know exactly what you're going to go through to get to it. And I think so much of that is about, exactly as you say, it's that I liked your thought about, it's not about the technology, it's about the experience, which is you've got to understand what you have to go through to get out the other side as to what proper digitization or digital enablement will mean. And a lot of it's to do with process. And I think, people pay too much lip service to this. I've spoken to business owners who, I coach a guy at the moment, and he said, one of his team has said to him, we need to develop an agile mindset. And he goes, yep, well, I'm pretty agile. not realizing. So he said, yeah, go and be agile, and then gets invited to scrums and sprints and huddles, and hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. It's just absolutely, what on earth is a sprint? And he had to say to me openly, so I've told them to go and be agile, but I don't know what that actually means. I was saying there is a disconnect or a misalignment in terms of expectation actually versus the reality. So I think it's sometimes you've got to go right the way down to basics and see whether it's actually worth digitizing things. Because if you can't personalize a letter, I had it today. I received an email from a guy who said, "Dear Mummery," and I just went, "No, gone."
Right.
Because you don't get the basics right, it's just not worth pursuing it.
I forgot your name was Piers. I was going to call you Dear Mummery from now on.
I'd be called worse.
Okay, so this brings an interesting topic up. Now, there are businesses out there, or you think of the education space now. COVID brings. You mentioned telehealth a little bit earlier, and digital telehealth, etc. You think of education now, the way in which our education systems and the way that we learn has kind of changed. There are platforms where you can go and buy courses from. You've got things like YouTube now. You've got all of these kind of areas. You've got companies who are now thinking about shifting their strategy and their approach to become more digital educators as opposed to physical educators. Is it still down to the experience? Or is this now also a situation where they need to really think hard about the technology that they're using as well? So obviously there is an innate relationship between technology and experience within that kind of digital piece. But right now we're doing this on a very simple technology. We're using Zoom. We're streaming on Facebook Live, and we're recording this to then put it onto a resource center. So it's very simple technology for an experience. I know there are a lot of people out there that have businesses who are consultants, experts, coaches, trainers. You think, and right now they're thinking about how they've got to move their business service offering to a way where the experience is going to be a lot more wider or deeper for their client base. What's your advice on the balance between technology and experience there?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think every business, every industry is probably going to have a different lens on that type of challenge. If I were to speak in generalization, I would say that generally speaking, what you want to think about if you want to be successful here is you have to think about the psychology. This becomes a psychology, it becomes an emotion-driven type thinking, which is sometimes very challenging for businesses who have been focused on a product and selling the product and having a high, those kinds of things. So this is an unbelievable opportunity right now where every human psychology is out. It's on the sleeves of everybody we speak with, right? We're just talking about how we're feeling and how we're thinking and what's annoying us and what's making us happy. We don't usually talk like that, right? But this global situation has put us in that position. If we really listen to ourselves and to what we're saying, that's when we can design really great experiences for people. So let's talk about education. You brought up education. I'm a parent. I've got 2 children. They're 8 and 6. They're lovely. They're handling this as well as can be. And of course, their schools have gone to a distance learning model. And I absolutely applaud what our particular school has done. I've really, really, really made it an excellent experience as I could imagine. Now, the psychology of this is I'm not a teacher. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a professional, I'm those things. I'm not a teacher. My house is not a classroom, right? I can do everything it takes to try to replicate those things, but at some point as a parent, I'm going to give up because that's not what I am. Furthermore, this is not a classroom environment because my children are in a classroom where they have 17 other students with them or 18 other students or whatever it is. And there's this inherent social experience happening from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I don't have that at home when they're alone. And so one of the things I've learned, Ketan, is that my children, when it's one-on-one education using an app or whatever the school has provided, after about an hour, my children are fried. And the reason is because it's one-on-one education versus 1 to 18. And when you're 1 and 18, you know, we all know when we're in a group environment, you could doodle a little bit. You know, Piers usually is never really listening to anybody. So he's always doing that, right? And so that allows him to survive for a couple hours in a long meeting. But that's the psychology, right? As a parent, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really have a guide. I've never done this before. I have children that are getting very tired very fast. So the best experiences would understand that. It's not about giving me a list of 100 things I could do for my kids, right? Because that's overwhelming for me. It's, here are 3 things. Try to get these done in an hour. If you can get these done in an hour, you know what? Let your children have the rest of the day, right? And let it be organic. My school was what did that, right? They sort of understood that. But that's the psychology. Now they've created a much more effective experience for me because I can map out my day in a more real and authentic way.
Sorry, right? Can I just pick up on, I mean, it's very interesting you say this. I mean, I'll tell you an experience I had in the US, which I was down there for a couple of years. It was, stayed in a hotel in LA and ordered room service, and it arrived via a robot.
Yep.
For me, extraordinary, and I couldn't stand it.
I know the hotel in Chicago, yeah.
And I went, whoa, that's like really, you know. So I sometimes feel that when business leaders are looking at digitizing their business, they think about 2 things. They think about efficiencies and increasing productivity, coupled with how can I save money and reduce my costs. So Amazon, for example, looked at drone deliveries, you know, because that's the way we don't need to employ drivers, we don't need vans, we just hook it on that, fly it up and drop it off. Fine, but they don't realize the experience from a consumer's perspective may scare the hell out of people, having a drone arriving in your garden and dropping something off, in the same way that I experienced that with a robot serving me room service. Just not me at all. And I think too often we just jump into technology because we think we can without thinking too much about the consequential experience for a consumer.
Right. So let's talk about, yeah, and you think about, you know, Ken, you and I were talking about the other day, one of the industries that sadly has gotten hit very, very, very hard is the restaurant business, right? And I'm a foodie, and it's very sad to see some of the restaurants that I love struggling, if not completely out, right? And I think that, again, if we think in the lens of psychology, what is happening today? My family is just like yours. We're locked in home, and we're largely scared of the grocery store. We're largely scared of anything else that's kind of externally coming into our home. That's what we've been conditioned to be. And as a result, we are cooking 3 meals a day for a family of 4 every day, right? That, as a foodie, that's fairly unsustainable. And I got to tell you, my biggest pain point in all of this is doing the dishes so many times, right? Our dishwasher is the hardest working member of our family. And it's driving me crazy, right? So when a restaurant says, hey, we have a takeout option, what is the psychology that they should be playing off of? I'm having great food at home, right? Sure, I would love some Michelin star meal or something I couldn't cook at home, but I'm getting really nice, healthy food, and we're curating what we want to eat, and it's been great. So the pain point is not that I want better food, right? Frankly, if I want a pizza, I can make a pizza just as well at home, and they've been good. The pain point you should be playing off of is, aren't you tired of having to deal with all your dishes, of having to deal with the pots and pans, of having to deal with coming up with a menu that 4 individuals, including, would like to eat, you know, where you have just one entree and one, you know, side dish versus a choice, right? Aren't you tired of all those things? My answer is, yeah, I'm really tired of all those things. So that is the experience that plays off of psychology that a restaurant should be delivering, right? And you're seeing some of it, right, in advertising, whatever, but largely I think that a lot of restaurants are still playing on the, I have the food that you don't have at home. That's not really my mindset right now. And that's the shift that has to occur, right? That is a transformation. Now, digital and online enablement, that's where we can come in and say, how can we help you do that? We're not the solution to what you're saying, but we are a big part of it, right? So maybe there's a different way to think about your app or your website or anything, right, that you offer. Like maybe there's an Alexa skill or something that we can do, that we can online enable the experience you're trying to and need to deliver.
It's interesting. You look at something like Spotify, or you look at Netflix. That's technology which has been all wholly experiential. It's bringing the movies to you on demand. It's giving you music on demand. It's allowing you to be creative. It's allowing you to be your own DJ at home, for example. Like, you know, we talked about this off this webinar around the sort of three things that you really believe need to come into the psychology and the strategy that need to be on board. I think a lot of people and business owners today, okay, one side of their brain is very much focused on the financial aspect of their business, but today we're not talking about finance. And what that does is that has an impact directly on the way that the psychology of what they have within their business.
Yeah.
Everyone's seeing, I just saw in the news today, where they brought two sets of gym owners onto the news segment, basically, and one of them literally flat out completely is like a very high profile gym, completely flat out. They've gone down to 0% of business because everyone comes in. They've been forced to create a TV channel which is to support their existing customers. The other one actually has decided to try and offer their services online to elderly people who are quarantined or self-isolated, for example. Okay. Now, there are these three things that you talk about. When you shared those with me, it talks about the psychology that you need to embed into your strategy before even thinking digitization. And I think it's really important that business, no matter how big or small you are today, whether you're a solopreneur, a self-employed, or freelancer, right the way up to a multi-billion corporation, these three things that Saurab is going to share with you are going to be very, very important. So Saurab, I would love you to share.
Yeah, for sure.
On that day, please.
So I'm a big, Piers might know this, but I'm a big sort of framework model guy because I think it helps everything. So I've been really struggling to think through the framework for this, for today versus, the next 3 to 6 months, next 12 to 18 months. I think that's, what you're alluding to is, I think that there's really three core stages we could look at here. The first is survive. The second is revive. And the third is thrive. And let's talk about it. So survive is exactly what you alluded to, right? And it's very real. None of them are less or more important. In fact, you could probably say survive is the most important today at this moment, right? And survive is all about how do I ensure that my business is a business the day that we get the yellow or green light to, open the countries as they were, right? Which I'm feeling more optimistic is coming, right? It feels like the tone is changing, and whether it's smart to do it as quickly as some people are saying, that's a different point. They've discussed it another day. But the idea is, look, I've got a team, I've got inventory, I've got all these aspects of my business, and how am I a business for the next 6 weeks? And so, great, that's survive. Revive is the next stage, which is assuming that I stay as a business, right? The day that we do open up the economies and I'm a functioning business again, how am I functioning? Do I have customers? Did they all leave me? How am I operating? If I'm a restaurant, we'll continue talking the restaurant space, what is the new normal? Can I operate at 50% capacity? How are customers going to come back? How are they going to feel safe? Right? So now you're actually operating a business, right? Thrive is stage 3, which is How do I take everything that we just went through and translate it into opportunity, into an area that I may have fundamentally pushed my business, accelerated my business because of this, because of what it forced me to do, and now I'm thriving. And there's a lot of studies. A friend of mine, a former colleague, he wrote a long article, which is really well written, and I'll share it on LinkedIn. But he talked about statistically in the 2008 recession that we faced, certainly the brunt of it here in the States, there was a lot of statistics about the leaders going into the recession were no longer the leaders coming out. There was a new crop of leaders that came out. That's thrive, right? It's not about taking advantage selfishly or being some sort of, challenging brand. It's just, look, we learned a lot. So that's the model I tend to use, and I use it for myself as a human. And I think that's the coolest thing about this is like I said, I'm a father, I'm a professional, I'm a school teacher now, I'm all these things. And I am figuring right now, how do I ensure that I get to 8 p.m. every night, right? That certainly from a health perspective or from a sanity perspective, I find my way to that glass of wine at 8 o'clock. That's survival, right? Part of my brain, right? If we think about a pie chart, right? The pies are not 33, 33, 33, but every business, every person should start allocating. What do I want my life to look like when social distancing starts to relax? Does that mean I'm going to have a party of 100 people coming to my house? Does that mean there's a small set of friends that I just really missed and I want to see you again? What does it mean? And how am I preparing for that, right? And that's sort of this revive part, because it's coming, right? What am I getting? My wife and I are talking about what does it look like if the schools open up? Are we wholeheartedly ready to send our children back? Do we need to start ordering masks for them now, kid-sized masks for them now, because we think that that's what it's going to be and there'll be a big rush? I don't know. But if I'm not thinking about it now, I've got a problem when it does actually happen. Yeah. These are basic stuff. So same for a business. When my customers come back, first of all, will they come back? Have I done enough to ensure that they want to come back? When they come back, what experience am I delivering to them, right? It's going to be the basics. I'm not going to have innovated in the last 3 weeks. That's very difficult. So then psychologically, also think through, how am I learning and growing as a human being so that 6 months from now, I'm fundamentally better than I was 2 months ago before all this happened, right? Can I be a more present, a more understanding father and understand where my kids really are? And now I really see how their brain works. Can I use this time and allocate a percentage, right? A little pie chart, a little slice, a wedge towards that. So as a business, if you're a CEO, you're probably knee deep in survival mode right now, right? If you're fortunate, if you're big enough and you have a CFO, that's what you're dealing with 99% of the time. Have you created a task force for Revive? Have you allocated some people, say, hey, spend a week, come back to me with ideas for what we can do the day that we're a company again, right, and functioning? Have you allocated another task force to think through innovation and what that looks like? How can we use the summer to propel ourselves forward in a profound way, right? What can the restaurant business learn so that when everything is life as normal, they don't really look like they used to look. They look better.
Yeah, I mean, you
can I just add something there, which I think is fascinating, just on that last point that Saurab has raised, which is many businesses are in furlough states at the moment, where you've got teams of people who are sitting at home, not working, okay, getting paid 80% of their salary or their wages. That has got to be the perfect time for a CEO, business owner, to say to anybody that they're working with, okay, use your normal working time, which you would be doing, but you're not anymore, and develop these innovations to the point about when you're reviving and thriving. What are we going to do in 6 weeks' time when the ban is lifted? How is our restaurant going to change? How is my gym going to change? How is my consulting business going to change? Talk to the people that have got time on their hands now to come up with ideas to get into the revive mode, which enables you to thrive. Because there are people out there now doing that who are locking down the opportunities, and they are the ones who will thrive because they'll make it so locked in you can't get around it.
But I think
So let's talk about what that might look like.
just to
Sorry,
add,
go ahead.
so all I was going to say is to add to that is whilst we're looking at innovation internally, I think it would be wrong not to include open innovation. So it's actually engaging those audiences. And like you said earlier, Saurabh, what is it you want to be like when you're out of lockdown? Do you want to be partying with 100 people around your house, or do you want to be going somewhere? Or so it's actually engaging in what people want to experience at that point in time as well. So
Yeah.
bringing that into that kind of open, that kind of intel into your sort of business and your process will really help shape what that innovation is going to look like. Almost get it to its MVP, right?
Yeah, and so again, we put together some of the things we've talked about, this psychology, this model. So, there's a stress-filled thought out there that this is just the first wave. The summer might look a little bit calm, but then this could come back in the fall. So let's make an assumption that could happen, right? I don't want to make that assumption, but let's make it, right?
Yeah.
The way that I, as a human being, have felt these last 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know that I want to feel this way the next time this happens, right? Because I think we've all felt the weight, we felt anxiety, we felt worry, things that we don't like to feel. So how do I future-proof myself so that if it does happen, the second wave, I'm going into it with a different mindset? Business is the same, right? No restaurant wants to go through this again, even though this may happen again. So this is where revive, that time frame, okay, what you just mentioned, is so critical. So let's talk about an example. It's funny, I was talking to a friend of mine last night who's really gotten himself involved in the Chicago restaurant scene and trying to be innovative, working with, I didn't realize how complicated it is politically, but City Hall and this and that and all the liquor laws and these things, but they're trying to navigate it. To what purpose, right? What if there isn't a new normal, or the new normal is such that people aren't really that excited about going to a common communal restaurant space 5 days a week, right, for the next 2 to 3 years, right? That is a legitimate thing that could happen. So how can I be smart about that? What if I look at it and say, you want my restaurant, you want the experience of my restaurant, but you're scared to come into the establishment. Thrive could be, I've got dine-in, I've got takeaway, and maybe I've got takeaway plus. And takeaway plus no one has. But what could takeaway plus look like? Maybe for a 20% surcharge, you get a bottle of wine, you get a tablecloth, you get a curated Spotify playlist, you get all the plateware and flatware you need, right? So you don't have to do the dishes, you don't have to do anything. Maybe even we make this playful. Maybe you get a dessert that you can bake yourself, so it's fresh and hot and piping, and you get to kind of see how we do it. Maybe at the end of the night, you get a 5-minute Zoom slot with the executive chef, where we use Zoom and everybody's comfortable with it now, and you get to talk to them for 5 minutes. What a thrill that you're connected to Grant Achatz or Gordon Ramsay or whoever for 5 minutes. Now I have a new product that the restaurant never had before. That's earning me revenue that I've never had before, that's sustainable for the next decade, right? And if this happens again, I'm ready. I've got takeaway and I've got takeaway plus. And I've mitigated my real estate costs, because if people can't come in the space, that's a problem for me, but I've got enough options to cover. That's what we're talking about.
It's very funny. It's ironic you say that, because Andrew Pfeiffer, who's watching this, said so restaurants could start offering curbside with fancy disposable dinnerware. So he was already mentioning this a bit earlier. Just to get a couple of quick comments from that have come in on the Facebook side that can add to the context. Gregor from Guatemala, how you doing? I hope you're still watching this. He said, just popped in. Going digital is 300% more important. Most excited about telehealth. Goes on to talk and say, Piers, good comment about considering end user perception. I think the end user experience perception is so valid. I think he was talking about the robot room service that you got. Andrew's saying about solve the problem, then offer a solution. So whatever it is that you're doing has to solve a problem. And I guess that problem is the bottleneck of the experience. I think what we are criminal of as business owners is trying to judge or guess or assume what the experience should be, without really understanding what the experience needs to be. So
I'll give you an example.
We kind of go in and say, right, you've got to have this color to brighten your life, but someone else says, actually, I don't need that. I need this color. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the first questions I always ask of a CEO or board member when I meet with them is, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
And the answer is never my website sucks. As much as I want it to be that for my own personal, like I'm a chief digital officer, they'll never say that. But that's why, Ken, when you first started off, we talked about perception of, failure. That's why, right? We never truly answered what it was that kept them up at night, right? I have many, many times been guilty of walking into a board meeting and here's an Alexa and like, look how cool this is. Look what it can do for you. And it's dead on arrival because it is cool, but it didn't solve a business need for them, right? So I think that thinking in this lens of what is it that you're really trying to solve is going to lead to something that is successful, both for the customers. What is it that you really need? What's the psychology going on? Then we can be successful. Equally as a CEO, what are your real pain points? I'll give you a real example with a client that ended up being a 6-year client, maybe the biggest client my company has had. It's just a tremendous engagement. The first meeting we had, sat down in our office and the CMO was there. And still to this day, I revere him. I think he's a tremendous, tremendous guy. And his biggest pain point, like we were talking about building a new, web presence. For them, their web presence was $3 billion in revenue a year. This was a big, big, big piece of it. And we're talking about all these things, right? IT versus marketing and mobile app and data and all this stuff. And as he told his story, he said, look, I come from a PR and journalism background. I am a storyteller. I believe that a website should be the story, should continue the story of your brand. And I can't do that on my website today. Fast forward a year and a half, we have a new site. It's made them hundreds of millions of dollars. Easy to call that a success. But he could have looked me in the eye and said, Saurab, you did not do the one thing that I wanted. We have a better website. It's all great. It's making us money. But I don't know that I could tell my story any better than I could a year ago. Now, fortunately, that didn't happen, but that's what I'm talking about. The one thing he wanted should have been paramount, right? And we all are guilty of that because sometimes we don't even ask. And this is true of humans too, right? Like we're all thinking of tactics and all these things like, aren't you happier that I did that? I cooked this meal for you. Aren't you happy? Aren't you thrilled that I did that for you? Well, was that really the one thing that I wanted? I didn't want to have to clean pots and pans. And now there's a hurricane in our kitchen.
Well,
So
often we find that the goals are unknown with innovation. So if you're trying to improve something, you're trying to do something differently, it's very hard to say to a client, let alone to yourself, well, that's what the goal is, because you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So you have to go through a process of discovery and many iterations. And it's this, I think this sort of, the whole idea of transformation is it's a process and it's a journey rather than a destination in itself. But all too often we're driven by those tactics, as you say, Saurabh. We need to find the answer, and that's the decision, and that's where we've got to get to. We go there and find you missed the original point because you don't know until you get there.
Well, I think I would encourage, we talked about don't use the word digital, and let's use the word online in this regard. Right? Digital is a word, but in this regard. Another thing that I would encourage people, and I try to push myself this way too, is the difference between the word goal and the word outcome, right? So if we think about a website, we could say the goal is I want to be able to sell my products online and generate end revenue. That's a great goal. But the outcome is actually larger than that. And the outcome is where we all have to get to as leaders is what is it that you really want out of that? I want to see my business grow and people thrive. I want to, the outcome could be ego driven. As a CMO, I want to do this amazing digital thing so that I can be viewed as a hero in this company and make my way even higher than CMO, right? If we get there, if we can surface true outcomes in ourselves and in the leaders we work with and us as leaders in professions, then we will always be successful, because that is the real destination we're trying to get to. So even in innovation, Piers, the outcome is not necessarily unknown. The outcome is, I am worried that if I don't change something, we're going to be stuck. And so my outcome is, I want to wake up on January 1st of 2021 significantly better than I was on April 15th, 2020. Now, if you do that, we're successful. Now we'll innovate along the way and we'll figure out what that means. Those are all goals. So I like this language of outcomes because it's a psychology driven thing.
I like that, and it's actually true to what Andrew's just said again. He goes, don't forget to improve your strengths as well as looking at your opportunities. Let's not call them weaknesses. We look at those as opportunities. Yeah. Find out why people love your product and service the way it is exactly, and how do you take it to its next level as well. So I think one could become very forgiven to over-consumed on what we have to change dramatically in our businesses to feed the here and now, and lose sight of the fact that actually there were certain things we were doing brilliantly already, and those are now going to be kind of become redundant. So it's also about creating a balance of knowing that there is certain things if you've been in business for as long as you've been in business, you're obviously doing something right. Mm-hmm. To that extent, it's as much as we need to understand what is it the customer wants to experience, we also need to understand what is still working within our existing practice that needs a little injection of nitrous oxide, basically, to take it to its next level.
Well, Andrew, I appreciate that comment. I think that's great. Think about this, right? How much effort, Piers, you and I have definitely talked about this, right? How much effort it takes to try to be better at the things you suck at versus trying to be better at the things you're good at. Where would you rather put your dollars, right? The things you're good at, to Andrew's point and your point, Kevin, people are resonating with that. Go win. Go be the best at that, because it's a lot of work with probably less return than you think. If you're not naturally good at something, you can't will your way to be better at it. I mean, I'm not saying don't do anything with it. I'm just saying, where are you going to place your bets? I agree with Andrew's point. Like, remember what you're great at and go be great at that stuff. Go be better at it.
And I learned a statistic the other day, which I don't know if I got the correct year, actually. I think it was last 2019. IBM's mainframe market grew 9%. You just think, mainframes? Seriously?
No.
But they are out there, living, breathing, growing, and being added to. Because actually, they're just so good at what they do. You just need to build on that. To unseat that and change.
There's a pizza place in Chicago, I won't mention the name, that arguably is my favorite of the famous Chicago deep dish style pizza, which really isn't pizza. It's just a giant pie with cheese and sauce, but it's, it is what it is. Anyway, they operate restaurants in the Chicago area, physical real estate spaces. That business, of course, that part of their business has tanked, right? Since people can't go to the physical space. They also offer frozen pizzas that you can ship, right? And it gives you the baking instructions and all these things. That business has gone up 400 to 500%. So what does that tell you? Great, that's a good thing. But what it tells you is people like their pizza. That is the strength. There's a million different pizza options, certainly in Chicago, but all over the world. You can go to the grocery store and there's, ad infinitum options. But the fact that part of their business has gone up says that they are winning that battle. People prefer their pizza to all the other options. Now, how do I take that and make that a strength or how do I take that strength and make that part of my thrive, right? My revive and thrive. And I think that's what we're talking about. I think that's really thrilled, Andrew, you brought that up, because I think that's a great point.
But it also comes back then to the whole thing of the experience as well. You see, so obviously up till now, that pizza company is a brand, to a certain extent. it's given an experience for people who have been coming to their restaurants or getting their takeout. Now, obviously, in current times, they can't get to the restaurants, but people still want to have that experience. So I think what's happened here is they have designed a way of packaging that experience and getting it to the people in a way that doesn't disrupt their brand integrity. In fact, is doing more for them because they're now becoming brand heroes. So the fact that if I can't get to your store, the store's coming to me in that respect.
Right. And it can go global, right? Now, when you've taken real estate, which is a hyper-local experience, and you've expanded it. So now people who were from Chicago, who knew this pizza brand, who have moved but crave that pizza brand, they can get it, which is, a new line of business. So yeah, it does a lot.
So I think kind of one of the learning points that I want to stress here for those of you that are watching this webinar is, whilst there is a significant importance to digitize, it's more fundamentally important to understand what you are digitizing and how you're digitizing it. And that starts with this whole experience piece. Now, the minute you go into the online world, as Saurab has kind of said, let's use that word, you become borderless. You don't have this whole border put around you or jurisdiction that you can actually apply your trade into. But let's not forget that no one's going to buy something unless they are going to get a valuable experience from it. So, from just to recap a little bit from what's come up in the beginning of this session, just in case you're coming on now late live, sort of talked about survive, revive, and thrive as three key strategies that you need to understand about your business. What are the things you need to do in each of these areas, which start to determine and dictate how you progress through this pandemic. But you've got to perceive this as an opportunity rather than a risk or a failure point, and actually understand that it's not how you reach your customer. It's understanding that you will reach that customer. It's what experience are you giving them in order to actually continue and maintain. Now, whether that's email, whether that's a fully immersed virtual reality, augmented reality walkthrough of something, right the way through to a simple, basic website, which is actually the shop front to your business. That's not the case. It's if you don't have that strategy up front, if you don't understand what experience you want to give to your customer, doesn't matter what digital tool or technology you put into place, it's only going to give the experience that you've actually set out to do. So kind of moving this to the next kind of level here. We've got abundance of our viewers are small business owners. They are, as I say, quite a lot in the services industry more than the product industry. So what's the kind of steps or advice, practical stuff that you would get them to do? We've talked a lot about the mindset and talked a lot about the strategic side of things, on how you build on customer experience. What's the next thing they need to really start to onboard here?
I would do a couple things. So the first thing I would do is I would blend the words I and you being the customer, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that you say, look, I believe in the product or service or whatever I give. I believe it has a lot of value, right? And to your point, that is only validated by truth that it actually offers a lot of value. And as I said in the beginning of this, we are in an unbelievable time where all of human psychology has been surfaced, right? We used to pay millions of dollars to do focus groups and hear the stuff that we can hear in one phone conversation with a friend, right? So as a small business owner, are you listening and really listening? Because everybody is broadcasting right now, every one of their pain points. Hear them, seize them, capture them, right? Write them down, memorize them, and empathize with them because you feel them too. You probably hate cleaning your pots and pans as much as I do. I can't believe there's somebody who loves it that much, right? So you probably feel a heightened degree of stress, and you're thinking about, how can I calm down? How can I, things like meditation and calm, all those, anything. We're all going through it, right? So that is unbelievable research you have access to right now. It's all there. So listen to that. And then I think, when you get into that psychology and start delivering obviously focus on survival. No one's going to say otherwise. Make sure you are a business tomorrow. Do everything it takes. And I get that, right? But if you think you are a business tomorrow, right, what are you going to deliver that is going to meet the new psychology of tomorrow? And that psychology will be online. There is no doubt that it will be online. So how do you take that psychology online in an authentic way, in a human way, in a differentiated way, in a progressive way that might be different than what your normal business has been to date, right? I think that those are the things I think about. And you could be a $1 million business or a $100 billion business. And to me, it's the same question. So that's probably what I'd say. Every business will have unique tactical things to do on the ground, and it's not worth it for us to try to, solve all of those in this call. Happy to explore that, right? In offline channels. Funny I use that word offline. In other channels, but I think that generally just using this model, understand the psychology and emotion, think about the other person, what it is you could do that really helps them, and I think that things will fall into place if you look that way.
I mean, that's some amazing kind of insight, and I think it is keeping keeping it simple. From what you're saying is the fundamental, most important thing. Don't put too much complexity into it. Don't overthink things. There is a common logic or a common sense process within everything. The answer is there. It's obviously staring people in the face. I think a lot of people just choose to move away from it, shift their attention, and say it can't be that straightforward and simple. But from what you're saying here, it no matter what you go on to produce online or digitize, it all comes back down to the psychology and the experience. If you don't factor those in, you're basically going to be concerting effort into something that's not going to give you any level of return that you're actually expecting. We're coming toward the end of this session here. Piers, do you have anything to add here?
I picked up on Saurab's comment about survive, revive, and thrive, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And my little simple brain, because I like sort of simple words, is trying to understand in a business, and it's a little bit reminds me of that sort of Simon Sinek thing about what we do, how we do, why we do it. Is think of that in the context of your customers, which is we know what they buy. They buy pizzas, they buy clothing, they buy holidays. We know how they buy it. They walk into my shop, they might get it online, they click and collect. But the key to the thriving bit is why they buy. And the why they buy, I think, is all to do with the value you create and the experience. And if you can understand the experience and you can understand the psychology, to Saurab's point, I think that will put you into the thrive mode very, very quickly.
That's right.
So, look, rather than kind of rushing out there, panicking, and thinking my business doesn't have a funnel, or it hasn't got the email automations, I don't know how to write the copy, I don't have to do this. None of that really matters at this stage unless you've done exactly this. Break down those three kind of survive, revive, and thrive, but actually also looking at the what, the how, and the why as well with this, because that I guess sort of what you're saying is sets the blueprint to what you digitize and how you digitize that experience or bring that experience online to your customers, right?
And I would say regardless, and as we wrap up, and regardless of how big you are as a business, I would argue that you do have everything you need when it comes to online. And we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have these channels. What are you saying there that actually resonates appropriately? Are you trying to sell something, or are you trying to add value? If you can add value, you are surviving, reviving. Your customers will find you because they'll remember you all along, right? So you have everything you need.
Wow. Any lasting comments, Piers, before we shut this session?
I want to talk to people who want to thrive.
You also talk to people that want to thrive. I think, look, Saurab, you've really helped bring a completely different perspective and dynamic to this kind of conversation. I think when we put the kind of title out about the importance to digitize your business, most people will come in with this expectation to be told this is what you need to digitize, this is why you need to digitize it, and this is how you digitize it. And the reason why I think purposely I wanted you to come out with, from this perspective is this is actually giving people an opportunity right now, which is so important because we're in an environment where we can't really go anywhere, to take 2 steps back and really start to look from above and around in their business. It's giving them that opportunity to get it right, to change things that perhaps weren't so great before, to make them brilliant, to take something that was an average experience and make it amazing, to take something that was a killer strength and make sure that this is what will lead them into their Thrive strategy as they move forward. So I don't know how many other words I can say apart from thank you for coming in and spending this time with us and sharing this kind of level of knowledge, expertise, and approach. I just think, it's priceless. I myself have actually started to really think about certain things within my own business as well, which I want to go away and now start thinking about, am I giving the right experience, the experience that I should be giving, the value piece, and then this whole expectation thing of like coming back to the user experience that Piers said about, robotic room service. Have we pushed too far, and are we giving more of a service experience than we should be to our existing customers? So if it's got me thinking, guys, if you're watching this, whether it's on record or live, it should get you thinking as well. So Saurab, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. And by the way, Piers, my kids love that hotel. They love the hotel. So for the robots. So I appreciate, Ken, appreciate the opportunity, and Piers for including in this, and for everybody's watching it live or recorded, taking the time. That it really that says a lot, and I appreciate that. And I look forward to more of these discussions.
No, 100%. Yeah, you've got to be careful what you wish for. We're gonna put you on a short leash to get straight back into the next conversation. Piers, thank you very much for introducing Saurab to us. And again, it just goes to show, guys, the power of networking. Just being open to expansive. We started to think about these different topics and seminars and webinars and stuff like this. And, a suggestion comes through if you're open to it. And, when Saurab and I actually spoke, I could feel the experience that this was going to bring, which is why we're doing what we're doing today. So take this as a lesson. It's not just about the digitalization. Think about your network and how you're opening up from across your network as well. I think we've got a nice job, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Bob Brogan. He's just come through and commented on that. So that brings us to the end of today's double headers. If you are watching this live, watch out tomorrow. Tomorrow I've got Ninda Johal joining me. He's a Deputy Lieutenant at Birmingham City Council. He's a guy who had to shift his whole business model and shift his business from the music and arts and entertainment industry when the likes of LimeWire and Napster came along to Apple Music and the Spotify. You're going to hear a story of how a disruption in the industry has disrupted a business, which is now disrupting back in the industry again. So make sure you tune in for that. But for now, Saurab, Piers, thank you very much for your time. And for any of you watching out there, remember, stay home, stop the spread, and keep saving lives. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.